Ever get that kind of musty smell in your house? You know the one. And think, uh-oh, is that mold?
Yeah.
It's like this silent dread, at least for me.
Right.
Well, we're diving deep into the world of mold remediation today because, frankly, it's a problem that's way more common than you might think.
It really is. And
Yeah.
what people often miss is that this isn't just about a little unsightly fungus. We're
Mhm.
talking about potential health hazards in the places we live and work every single day.
Okay, so paint a picture for us. How common are we talking? Give us the numbers.
So research suggests that a staggering 30 to 40% of indoor environments have some level of mold growth.
Wait, hold up. Almost half of us could be dealing with mold. That's kind of terrifying.
It's definitely something to be aware of. And that's why ethical remediation is so important. Because when we say mold, we're not just talking about a bit of discoloration. We're talking about potential respiratory problems,
Yeah.
allergies, even chronic illnesses in some
Oh,
cases.
wow.
It's about protecting our health, not just making things look pretty.
So it's not just about a quick fix. It's about making sure it's really gone.
Exactly. And this is where it gets even more unsettling. Studies have shown that up to 18% of environments that were already remediated for mold still had problems when a third party came in to test.
So almost 1 in 5 times someone could think their mold problem is solved. But it's not. That's a huge deal.
It highlights a critical point. There's a difference between simply masking the problem and actually addressing the root cause. And that's where the ethical concerns around mold remediation come into play.
Which brings us to our deep dive today. We're talking about those shady practices, potential manipulation of samples, the works. And joining me to help us navigate this is a true expert in the field, someone who can help us separate the mold from the mold.
Yeah.
Not mold.
Like-
Get it?
Glad to be here. And you're spot on. It's about trust, transparency, and making sure that when you hire someone to remediate a problem as serious as mold, they're doing it right.
Because we're talking about our homes, our workplaces, places where we spend hours upon hours. We're putting our health, not to mention a lot of money, in the hands of these companies. We need to know how to make sure we're not being taken advantage of.
Absolutely. In a situation like this, knowledge is power. The more you understand about ethical remediation,
Yeah.
the better equipped you are to make smart decisions about your living and working spaces.
So how do we arm ourselves with that knowledge? Where do we begin to find trustworthy experts in this whole mold remediation world?
That's where an organization like CARSI comes in, the Council for Air Remediation Standards and Integrity. They're essentially the ethical watchdogs of this industry, working hard to clean up some of these shady practices.
Okay, Karshi, they're the good guys looking out for the little guy. Got it. But what does that actually look like in practice? How do they make sure things are done right?
They've got a few core principles that they champion, and understanding these can be a real game changer for homeowners. First and foremost, they're all about transparency. We're talking full disclosure of all testing data, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because hiding unfavorable results helps absolutely no one.
Especially not when it comes to something as important as the air we breathe. You know, it's funny when you're talking about bearing results. It reminds me of something I read in one of the CARSI reports. Apparently, around 40% of indoor air quality assessments have incomplete reporting. That's a crazy amount of information that's just missing.
It's concerning, to say the least, and it underlines why this focus on transparency is so crucial. It's not just about a yes or no to mold. It's about the types of mold present, how concentrated it is, what the potential health risks are. You deserve the full picture.
It's like going to the doctor. You don't just want to know if you're sick, you want the diagnosis, the treatment options, the whole 9 yards.
Exactly. And this leads us to CARSI's next big principle, objectivity. They are huge proponents of independent third-party testing.
Okay, so what does third-party testing really mean? Break it down for us.
It's like getting a second opinion from a doctor. But this one isn't also trying to sell you a specific treatment. You want that unbiased perspective to make sure you're getting accurate information. With mold testing, if the same company that profits from the remediation is also the one doing the testing, well, let's just say there's a bit of a conflict of interest there.
It's like letting the fox guard the henhouse. You can't tell me there isn't at least a little temptation to maybe, shall we say, adjust those results a tad.
And the numbers back that up. CARSI found that a startling 32% of mold remediation companies that use in-house testing have faced issues with bias. You're essentially rolling the dice with your health if you go with a company that does both testing and remediation.
Wow, okay, so transparency and objectivity, got it. What's the next thing CARSI is fighting for?
Informed consent. They believe that you, the homeowner, the person living in that space, have the absolute right to understand those test results. You shouldn't be left in the dark. trying to decipher jargon, or getting some watered-down explanation.
That makes so much sense. I wish I had known this before I had my own basement checked for mold. It would have saved me a lot of worry and potentially even money.
It's about empowering homeowners like yourself to make informed decisions about their own spaces. And yet, a shocking 67% of clients weren't fully aware of the tests being done in their own homes. That's just not right.
That's a huge number of people who are basically left in the dark. So how do we flip the script and make sure we're not one of them?
Ask questions. Don't be afraid to push back if something doesn't feel right, and insist on clear, understandable explanations. Knowledge is power, and you have the right to be fully informed about what's going on in your own home.
Transparency, objectivity, informed consent. We're building quite the ethical checklist here. What else should we add to it?
Financial transparency. This one's huge. No hidden fees, no surprise charges, just clear upfront communication about costs.
We've all been there, hit with those surprise fees that make your jaw drop. CARSI wants to make sure that doesn't happen when it comes to something as important as your family's health.
You're right, it's a classic move.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's more common than you might think in this industry. Their research shows that 38% of customers encountered unexpected charges during remediation. That's a significant number of people feeling blindsided.
So CARSI's saying, not on my watch. But how do they actually enforce this? What happens when a company breaks the rules?
That brings us to the final, and arguably most important principle, accountability. CARSI wants to make sure companies are held responsible for their actions. If they're cutting corners, manipulating data, or misleading clients, there need to be consequences.
Because otherwise, what's the point of having standards in the first place, right?
Precisely. And there have been cases where companies have faced hefty lawsuits for providing false or misleading mold reports. For example, one company was hit with a $500,000 lawsuit. These legal repercussions are crucial for driving real change within the industry.
Okay, so we've uncovered some pretty alarming stats about mold. We've learned how widespread unethical practices are in this industry, and we've met our new best friend, CARSI, who's fighting the good fight for transparency and accountability. But let's get down to brass tacks. What can we as everyday people actually do about all of this?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And this is where understanding those CARSI principles we talked about can really make a difference. Think of them as your tools for navigating this often confusing world of mold remediation.
So it's not just about knowing the rules, it's about using them to protect ourselves.
Exactly. And one of the most important things to remember is to be wary of companies that offer both testing and remediation services. Remember that conflict of interest we talked about? That's a major red flag.
Right, because if they find mold, they get to sell you the fix. It seems like a recipe for disaster.
You got it. It's always best to choose companies that specialize in one or the other. That way you're getting a more objective assessment and protecting yourself from potentially biased recommendations.
Okay, so specialization is key. What other red flags should we be watching out for?
Pay close attention to how information is shared. Are they upfront and willing to answer all your questions about the testing process? Or are they being evasive, using a lot of jargon, or rushing you into a decision?
Or giving you that classic line, don't worry, we've seen this a million times before.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to ask questions, push back if something doesn't feel right, and insist on clear, understandable explanations. Remember, this is your home, your health, your money. You have the right to be informed.
So transparency and clarity are key. But what about those pressure tactics? This feels like an industry where it would be easy to get scared into making a hasty and potentially expensive decision.
You're spot on. Be wary of companies that pressure you into immediate, costly remediation without giving you time to think it over, compare quotes, or get a second opinion. Don't let fear be the driving force behind your decisions.
Okay, so we're watching out for conflicts of interest. We're demanding transparency. And we're not caving to pressure. This is a lot to keep in mind. How do we even find those ethical, trustworthy companies in the first place? It feels like finding a needle in a haystack.
It doesn't have to be. This is where CARSI can actually lend a helping hand. They have a certification program, so look for companies that are CARSI certified. This means they've met certain ethical and professional standards.
Oh, so it's like a stamp of approval, a gold star from the mold police. That's super helpful.
Exactly. It's a great starting point. And of course, always do your research check, online reviews, look for companies with a proven track record. And don't hesitate to ask for references.
So it's all about being proactive, arming yourself with knowledge, and choosing wisely.
Precisely. And remember, you have the right to get everything in writing. The scope of the work, the cost of guarantees, before any work begins. Don't be afraid to advocate for yourself and your right to a safe and healthy environment.
This has been incredibly eye-opening. I feel like I've gone from clueless homeowner to mold-savvy investigator in the space of an episode. It really shows you the power of information.
It really does. And it's something we can all benefit from, especially when it comes to something as important as the air we breathe.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of ethical mold remediation, it makes me wonder, what does the future hold for all of this? Are we destined to wage war against mold forever?
That's a great question. And it has me thinking about all the advancements in technology we're seeing. Imagine a future where smart sensors in our homes could detect mold issues early on, before they become major problems. Or where blockchain technology could create tamper-proof records of those test results, making it even harder for unethical companies to mislead homeowners.
Wow. We've gone from shady operators and hidden fees to a future where our homes are practically fighting mold for us. That's an exciting thought.
It really is. With organizations like CARSI leading the charge and technology evolving at such a rapid pace, it feels like we're heading toward a brighter, less moldy future.
That's certainly something to look forward to. For links to CARSI and all the resources we've talked about today, be sure to check out our show notes. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and remember, when it comes to mold, you don't have to go it alone.